Thanks, Phil, for joining us with the In the Know podcast. Thanks for taking the time out.
My pleasure.
An industry legend in my eyes, as it is right now. But then every story starts from somewhere. So where does the Phil Telfer story start?
It certainly didn't start in BPO. In fact, I'm not sure BPO existed when I started. So I left school at 16. I don't think anybody stayed for A-levels where the old boys comp I left behind. And I wandered and drifted a little bit for a few months because I didn't really have any idea what the hell I was going to do. My dad was an engineer, mum clerical worker, grandparents, joiner, printer. So that type of trade was a thing surrounding me. And I decided, or I got an opportunity to join St James's Hospital, so a health service. You will be too young to know this, but it was a YTS scheme or a YOP scheme, Youth Opportunity Scheme.
You used to get like £19 a week or something?
£21 in cash.
There you go.
I used to have to queue up at the cashier's desk with my little brown envelope, and my dad still took £7 of that, 21 for me. Bless him. But it got me into something, got me into a place that I thought would find a career or work out, help me, give me some time to work out what I was going to do, because I had absolutely no idea. Played a lot of rugby. I was very much a team guy at the time. That was probably the predominant activity in my life at that time. But finding gainful employment, I think it was a tough time. That was early 80s. There wasn't masses of opportunity going on at the time. So I got in, and it was quite structured. I was in finance, accounts receivable and accounts payable, and they moved you around and gave you a little bit of insight. And then a temp job came up at the end of that, so I did that for, I think it was a 3-month scheme, temp job. So I temped in the jobs I was doing as a YTS in finance. Then a permanent job came up in management accounts, so budgeting and variance analysis. And they were also kind enough at that point in time to send you off to college. So I'd left with modest amounts of O-levels, it's fair to say. But they sent me off to do a BTEC to open my mind up a little bit, which was great. I had a wobble at the end of that because I thought I want to go to university now, and it was a route into university. But I didn't take it, I stuck with it and started SEMA. So then after the BTEC, they invested in people, which was brilliant at the time, and I started SEMA course. That took me to college, and suddenly I realised there was a private sector out there, which I don't think in my life I didn't see so much of, but a job in finance in the private sector had things like income rather than just costs and budgeting and variances. And it didn't take me long, I'm mixing in that crowd of people to say, do you know what? I think I'd like to get into some sort of industry. I'd like to see finance in the broader spectrum. I'd gone through 3 or 4 grades. I've probably stayed in the health service 4 or 5 years. They were very good to me. But I didn't want to be a finance accountant in the health service. I knew that, but I still had visions I would be an accountant. So after the first place I got to in Leeds was ASDA. And I was one of 55 management accountants in ASDA doing store variance analysis, which was rather detailed work and interesting to an extent. But it got me into proper business. It made me go to regional meetings and present results and take me out of my comfort zone and start getting me into environments that were better for me. And it was good. And my first leadership position came in about 18 months. And I was asked to team lead a group of people like I was at the beginning. Only the group I led, a group of people that had no intention of getting any further in their careers, but quite enjoyed making the life of the team leader quite difficult. So it was a smashing opportunity to understand managing awkward people, which you realise in life you need that skill for the next 30 years. No company accepted from that. So that sort of I was at private sector, sort of understanding P&Ls and understanding data, a very detailed job which was sort of relevant but not desperately interesting. And then I was approached by Michael Page, as they always do, to get me into a finance role, a head of finance in a retail credit business, joint venture between Kingfisher and Club 24, as it was back then, if you remember that organisation in Leeds, part of Next. And that was basically a team of account managers and salespeople taking retail credit products to the Kingfisher group, B&Q, Charlie Brown's, if you remember that brand, Comet, if you remember that brand, and do a store card proposition. Quite an important phase for my career, because I was company accountant, So that was management accounts, financial accounts, tax returns, pricing, everything. So my skill level in terms of understanding numbers changed dramatically and dynamic at that time. And the next person up were finance directors of people like Kingfisher that were guiding you, so it was fantastic. Taught me two things. One, I didn't want to be an accountant. But two, I'd seen these account managers and these sales guys. I'd seen them learn to present because they were selling or presenting all the time. I just started to watch and observe presentation skills. Again, I thought, I think I'd like the idea that I'd like to be in front of people. I'd like to be promoting and progressing that type of conversation. But I didn't take the step then. I just thought it was a brilliant environment to learn. So finance was sort of ticked, but other skills and other areas of skill development was starting to develop in front of me, which was fantastic. And a small team of people, about 15 of us, so you knew people very well. They're all older than me by 10 years plus. But it was a fantastic learning experience. It was a company set up just for a purpose, highly motivated to achieve getting 1 million time cards out, it was at the time. And it was fantastic, dynamic, highly energised business. Next step was a bit strange, because we were actually operating with the BPO at the time, so this will have been when I was 25, so 35 years ago. But we're actually outsourcing the administration, the billing, the payment processing, the customer service handling was all within Club 24, so it was already an outsourced relationship. I decided to join that I was asked to join that organisation, and I went to be planning and information manager. Clearly numerate, but planning for call centres was not something I'd done. Airlines, etc. But again, two things. One, I didn't want to be that as a career, but second, I understood the dynamics of that business. How to staff at the right time of day when contact was coming in, all that, understanding how to report. And it gave me quite a fantastic insight how the machine worked of a delivery organisation like that. But that was great, but I think the next major step for me was I was asked at the time, I think they were either called BT Cellnet or whatever, but what is O2 now in its very early incarnations. We're doing a long-term contract, and I was a bit last man standing, but I was numerate, I was intelligent, so they asked me to front up and do a 5-year contract with them at the time, which took me off to Slough on the plane every 2 or 3 days a week, fronting up to senior people, designing a contract, designing an operation, designing the measures, designing commercial factors, massive learning opportunities at the time. And we got that done. I'm still friends with my opposite number today. There's a friend of mine lives in Harrogate, you'll know him, Richard Shannon. But it just developed a massive understanding. It was a very short burst of learning about how to do business in that sector, because it was basically an outsourcing contract. Couldn't have been a more perfect time for a business, because there was the start of the mobile revolution. After that came broadband. The business rebranded to Ventura, which is a name I know you'll know because you were part of it later on in your own career. And we started to say that proposition, so that was the real first biggie. He had some financial contracts, but that was the first real biggie. That first really meaty, interesting one. I guess another epiphany in my time was standing in the boardroom. So I was talking to what was the Retail Credit Board of Directors, starting to explain BPO, started to explain I stood at the front and I pointed to every one of them and told them what they needed to do to make the contract work. I just felt so on it, and I've been doing the contracts and designing it for so long, I just knew exactly what it was. So I told as an example, told the HR director, you're going to have to train your people to not just take the query, but to get them retained, get them taking higher products, selling on the calls. And this was a long time ago now, because we created a dynamic contract that would get paid more if we sold more. I just knew my stuff. And from then, that Ventura career develops. We became, I don't think we need to go through the whole night of long knives with the rest of the board at the time, but the telco board, which I was then part of, took over the whole of Ventura. Financial services, utilities, public sector gang were removed, and we were leading the business. And I think that's probably, if you think about motivation and things that I realised I could achieve, I think the biggest things to me at the time was realising the better at my job I was, the more jobs we created. I remember going down to Dearne Valley, and I know you'll have been to the Dearne Valley many times in your Ventura times, when the building was just put up. So there was 4,000 seats over 2 buildings, as you remember. stood with David Keynes, who was next FD, and Simon Wolfson, who was CEO soon after. We had 100 people doing telnet work in the corner. There's room for 2,000. It was basically an empty warehouse. They said, it's your job to fill that building, which was terrifying and exciting, all in the same breath. What was fantastic, and this is a bit back to my roots with my dad. My dad was a trade unionist. So looking after people, creating success, creating opportunity was something that was in our blood a little bit, looking after people. And I realised in that job, the best thing I could do was create opportunities for people. And the more successful me and the team could be, the more jobs we could create. You know that area, Spencer. That was an ex-mining and steelworking area. High unemployment, multi-generational unemployment, and we managed to, I think, if the facts are true, if the statements are true, should I say, we created more jobs in the call centres down there than existed at the time on the steelworking in the mining, in that direct area. As we filled those two sites over, what was 2 or 3 or 4 years, I can't quite remember now, but that was a fantastic experience. I just felt very powerful that I could make a difference to communities, and it's something that's probably never left me. The opportunity in a job like that, maybe a bit different if it was going to be a finance director. I didn't have that feel, that buzz, that instinct in my stomach. But I love the opportunity in that way, the difference we could make, and we really felt we could make it down there. And I used to love being down amongst the people, and you see multi-generations of families working in there, whether it was in the canteen or whether it was in the call centres or support services. It was brilliant, and the industry was buzzing, and the market was growing, and we had a great proposition. We had a great bunch of people, and I think you know a lot of the people who've gone on to have fabulous careers in the industry. It was a real hotbed of talent at a time. We think we grew the numbers from nothing, I guess. So eventually, at the end of my journey, there was about 190 million in 2 spells. So that was great. Got to board level. Got a great bunch of account managers and salespeople, marketing roles. Fabulous time in my career. I'm a Yorkshireman. Head office was in Leeds. That was my hometown. I was creating a lot of jobs in Leeds, which was fabulous. Leeds and in the Dearne Valley, so in the county. So I loved all that time, and my career progressed right up to the moment which will make us both smile when I was made deputy MD of the organisation. Then it felt like a time for change for me. Some people remember the business called Garlands in the northeast. Shy Garlands, she was a immensely powerful lady, created a business from nothing to 3,000 or 4,000 people in the north, around the Middlesbrough, Stockton, Hartlepool area. Wanted me to go take over in time. She was an owner manager. Did some great things. She actually shook the industry up enormously. I'm not sure I went at the right time for her. I'm not sure it was the right time for her either personally. But even back in those days, we were very, very close to launching the South Africa service, which I think would have been the stepping stone for the future of that business. I'd say we were sort of one small decision away, one piece of time in a way. But that exposed me again to the potential of new locations for what was traditionally UK jobs. But that wasn't to be. That didn't work out for me and Shy. She had challenges about the business and ended up having to let the business go.
Was your choice to do that a bit of a proving to yourself that you could do it? Because you were part of a broader team from the Ventura piece. Was Garlands about you doing it yourself?
I think it was a recognition, my understanding recognition that I was going to be leading a business, and I wasn't selected to lead the business at the time in Ventura. There was a moment in your life where you think, I think I need to have a change. I think I need to change. I'm going to do something different and go outside of that network and that family that you know, and get yourself into some uncomfortable places for a while. And just try something. And this was a corporate. We're owned by Next. You still operate in that corporate world. This was a little bit more of a family business, a sole trader, an owner, very different dynamic. And I thought that would be a good test for me. And at that point in time, I'd only ever grown, so I thought wherever I went, I could continue that theme. But it wasn't to be for lots of reasons. I had a lot of dependency on one big contract, and that was not retained, and it quickly, sadly, because it employed an awful lot of people and did a great deal of good to those regions, it went into a fairly fast decline. And as I came down into Leeds for an interview, as that the next stage of my career was started to be explored. I think James was either CEO or the chairman at the time, but he called me because he knew I was in Leeds. I'd bumped into somebody, I don't know if you were, I bumped into some of the old account team as I was on my way to an interview. And he phoned me and asked me to meet up, and he asked me to come back, which was, I think, a relatively easy decision. I'm not sure I can overplay that. I felt like getting back into a comfortable set of shoes, new management team, so different people leading the organisation. Still the same next people. But felt like it was unfinished business, I think, more than anything. I think the business had gone into a decline, so it wasn't as healthy as when I'd left it, both turnover and client relationships and prospects. So there's a little bit of come back and fix it, get it back on the right track again. But amongst people that I knew in the main, different board of people, so a different group of people there. But so I came back. So my second spell was probably about 2 or 3 years as Ventura, and then the Capita, and then we grew the business again. Got the business back on its track, and that was taking it from 100 million to 180, 190 million, and got it back on track. And then the Capita acquisition came along, which was fabulous.
I think it also reflects about how humble you are, because it's your ability to just kind of do it was an easy decision to make wouldn't be for everybody. Especially at that time where you're very much about the people and growing a business, and the fact that Garlands had gone the other way.
Yeah.
So, you could easily self-reflect about that being a personal thing that you haven't succeeded, but your ability to move on very quickly. Yeah. It's about how you can kind of reflect things quite quickly.
Yeah, and there was a massive sense of getting it back. I could help it get back in shape again, because it was struggling, and the first thing we had to do was go fix the biggest client relationship, which was on the brink of departure, and Shai's business had the same problem, and it broke them. So the first thing was to do was to go repair the big relationship with the biggest client. I felt I could do all that.
Do you think you learned a lot then through the Garlands?
Massive. In terms of style of management, in terms of things that impacted people's decision making, from a corporate structured organisation decision making, it became a bit more emotional. Yeah. Mindset, a little bit more managing the day, depending how good the morning had been personally for people, the influence of single people over the whole organisation, how to operate and be successful in it. So it's a massive regret, because I'm sorry the business ended up that way, but we're actually incredibly close to doing some brilliant things that would take it on, would have had an advance in the market. Yeah. At that time, we're a bit unlucky, but I never lost my confidence. But I felt I probably operated better in a corporate environment. I think that was probably my... Yeah. And I guess, aren't we all? Sometimes somebody wanted me to go back, and that played to my ego. They wanted me back, and I wanted to go back, and of course it meant I was back in my hometown with people I cared about and people I knew, and a bit of unfinished business, I think, as well. Actually come back, and I think it's been really important to me if I'm in a job, I've got to make a difference. Yeah. And in sales, that's, of course, it's numbers and it's growth, and it's the types of business, and it's the developing ideas and things. But that absolute sense of unfinished business that took me back there to say, my God, it's in a couple of years, they've made a bit of a mess of this. So it became that challenge to fix the problems and get it back on the right trajectory, because I knew it was a good business.
What were the big things that you think really turned it around in that second phase? Not just you personally, but just in terms of how you worked as a management team, because it was a pretty successful team.
We got into all verticals, didn't we? There was an energy about the place I've never experienced anywhere else. And it'll come back in the story later on, but there was an energy about the people. There's a brightness and a willingness to think differently, like I'd never seen any before. So I didn't have to be the leader of thinking. You had to be the gatherer of ideas and the coach to get those into play. And then I had to be a strong player in the boardroom to drive through change. And I felt very confident that I knew what needed to be done, and I knew that I had to come through client facing. No question in my mind, the success comes from being a client facing organisation. Of course, you need to look after your people. But if you're really client facing and proposition led, you can be successful.
It's interesting using the word coach, and you talk about the fact that you want to grow things and look after people, because that must be part of the sporting person that you are. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, especially playing such a large sport 15 obviously in the game, but it's more like 23 in the squad, or it's even bigger than that, wider. You know, that those early days of being part of a big, competitive team drive some of that into your work.
I think so. I got the teamwork. I never wanted to be the leading player. I think I needed a company to recognise it needed to be client led. So I knew my discipline was important for the success of the company, but it wasn't about ego. That was about, if we're seen to be client led, we understand our clients, we'll grow with our clients. So it was crystal clear to me. But I didn't try and be FD. I didn't try and look after the people. I knew that group of people had to drive the business forward, and at various times in that Ventura career there was a great group of people that all brought something to the table. We had common purpose, but interestingly we were never driven deeply by next. We were never set 10% growth targets. We had to really not, I would probably the best summary I can make with next in some of the areas is just don't make a mess of things. Don't create a bad surprise for them, because they're a retailer and this was an interesting byproduct of their history in financial services. But they never drove our agenda. We drove it. Our ambition was driven by the team to grow certain levels, to get into new verticals. You remember yourself when we broke into the public sector, and that wasn't 20 or 30 seats, that was 800 seats. But that was breaking with a sector we had no right to be into. We were bright, we were ambitious, we were open-minded, we were very driven as a group, and that was the coaching side of it to me, to get people, to get the best of that talent, thinking in a way to get our proposition ahead of the big players, I think, at the time.
So how did you feel when, because obviously that, taking it back again, growing it, how did you feel when you first heard about the Capita potential acquisition?
Honestly, excited. Because if I reflect back now, I think it was starting to get to what more could it do? There was an element of that. We were starting to talk about South Africa increasingly at that point in time. But I felt, being an ambitious propositions guy, that we should be really front foot and growing the business. I felt that the group size of a Capita were a professional BPO organisation that had been very successful and very ambitious to get into the private sector. Ironic, when we saw them in bids, we never feared Capita in that point in time, because we were just more on it. They came from the public sector and we were all just more on it. We were better relationship developers, in my opinion, better proposition developers. But I did see the size of the organisation could take the business to new heights, and I think there'd have been a limit. At that point, Next wouldn't have continued. There'd be a point about when they'll stop investing. They bought us buildings to grow into. But if we're going to take our business deeply offshore, I mean, there's a chance of buying an Indian business, and they pulled out of that at a key point. You could see they would only go so far with us. And I think we'd got it to an optimum point, probably of valuation and everything then at that point in time, with a good client spread, good across most verticals, good growth history, good pipeline. It was a bit of an optimum time. So I was really quite positive about it. I think it was the right thing for the business.
Or was there a collective positivity across your peer group?
Do you know what, Spencer? I can't remember how the rest of them feel. I was quite a leading player at the time. Certainly, I think the FD and the MD at the time were excited. I did a lot of the fronting up to Capita about the business, about the client, about the history, about the potential, about our growth strategies and things like that. So I was really excited to talk about things we were good at. I think the business was ready. Next was certainly ready.
Yeah.
I think the business, it was going to change the business. It was going to stop being a local player doing really well. It's going to take it to another level. But it came at the same time as the Vertex acquisition. Of course, we followed that one. So suddenly, Capita had one big private sector business that was competing with the top end of the industry in the UK at that point in time. So we had loads of clients, loads of talent. We had a group that was ambitious, and that was their industry. That's where they're going. These magnificent things called big bid teams, and that looked at big deals in a different way. And we were talking about transformational deals 15, 20 years ago. We still talk about them now, but they were much more technology, transformation driven, take over things, redeploy, offshore, lots of big ideas to make a big difference to the client. And I think it's what the company, if it was going to move on, I'm not sure it would achieve that, staying what it was. So I think it was an important part of its journey.
Loads going on in that decade and a half. How did home fit around the outside of that, big family man and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. How did that not fall apart at the same time as the focusing on other people and business?
Yeah, that's a fair question, because it travelled a lot, worked a lot of hours, absolutely committed and excited by the job. I think I had a wife and two girls. We were all quite heavily in the routine, as I just went and spent a lot of time at work, and Sam was incredibly supportive of bringing the girls up while I did this sort of thing. But it's just what we did. I don't think there's anything you thought about. I think if I look back, certainly later in my career, work overwhelmed that time when it was important time. But we got through it okay. But what I would do, and it's a mixture of regret and opportunity for me, when I travelled a lot, whether it was Philippines, India, South Africa, wherever opportunities led for us, I would go in and get back, say back to the family, so I'd do it in 2 days or 3 days. My regret, which I always have, is I never spent time to understand those countries. I was in and out boardrooms, in and out of presentations, in and out of hotels. I wish I'd have spent more time to understand where we were doing business, why we were doing business. And even to take Sam on some of those trips, I never gave ourselves a chance to do any of that. And I regret that, because I've had some fantastic travel and seen so little. So, but we were fortunate. I was successful. We lived in nice homes. So there's part of it that there's good things in your life, and you made sure everybody was looked after. And we got through that. We got through that pretty well, I think. But there were times it became too out of balance, and that was probably in the later in my career, Concentrix and Convergys period of the career.
So talk about Capita. So obviously that acquisition happened, and probably a honeymoon period, and then what happened after Capita then?
So that remained pretty exciting for a while, and we liked the management team that worked with us at least. Certainly the finance team were quite a breath of fresh air. And there was certainly ambition. I loved ambition. I think that's driven me. My ambition is when the business is ambitious. You can't fight against that, but when the flow's with you, you just get excited about what ideas you can take to your clients. And I've loved the idea, and I've always pushed my team, and I still do it today when I'm advising, to take ideas proactively. Don't listen to what the client needs, listen to what the plans are, and be proactive with the idea generation. This felt like I got a load more ingredients, so I was just so excited about that. The only thing that changed with Capita was people. Over time, they had quite a regular change of leadership, and then they brought in a leader that was strong in the sort of public sector, pensiony type, less dynamic, I would call it, part of their business, to lead what I think was a very dynamic business in terms of the types of clients had. And we know the dynamic pace of mobile and broadband and those sort of fast-moving industries. And we didn't get on. So it was a quick exit. I don't think the individual liked me. I didn't respect where he was coming from. So it was a very natural time again to actually say, I've sort of done my job. I've enjoyed that space. We sold it. I've enjoyed the growth again, and we've done some great deals. I've enjoyed it. But that felt time. It felt a very natural time again. It was the end of the road.
Unusual for you, because your whole career has never been about a conflict, really, has it?
No. It was one of the first ones that I really struggled with, and it took me a while to try and work out why, and I'm not sure I ever did. But in respecting everyone's individual choice, people have got an operating model, and it changed the relationship, the role of a client manager, which I fundamentally believe in the part of sales and the sales target driven, they've got to grow, and it changed the dynamic of P&L ownership and things like that, and I just didn't get the model.
No, because like you said, moving from that finance role to that quasi sales fight, you pick that up really quickly, that the client is the centre of it all, really.
No question. The best 9 months spent was sitting with the client, working out how we did business together, and then contracting for it. You sort of knew the importance of that relationship and influence you could bring that would dynamically impact your own business. So there's no question for me. It had to be client led, and that time it became operations and P&L led, which made me think we're going to start making decisions for the good of the P&L, not for the good of the client and for the growth, because I think those things are so well attached. So it was a very natural point, as philosophically, just didn't see the world in the same way. So you've got to respect that people have got to come in and do a job. So I think from no names needed, but when he came in and it wasn't long, it probably took him longer to tell me I was going than he needed to, because I was sat waiting for 2 or 3 weeks. But it just was time.
And dropping out of there, I mean, it must have been an element of fear, because it's like age, paying the mortgage, kids, outgoing, that sort of thing. So how did you feel at the time on the other side of the fence?
I think I was okay, and my network was very strong, but I felt like I needed to do something a bit different, and I got the opportunity, if you remember, with KPMG. So I knew some of the senior leaders in the Leeds office. I knew they'd been playing with BPO ideas. That I'd met them several times to talk about how they could get more active in that type of world, not contact centre BPOs, but outsourced type services on a higher volume scale.
And definitely a client-focused organisation.
Definitely client-focused. A bit weird in terms of organisational structure. Lots of directors and lots of partners. You're already told when you joined. I joined as a director. That was never going to be a partner because I was already too old. And it was one where there wasn't really a job. They just wanted me to come and have a look at stuff, but not as a contractor, but to come in as an employee and see if I could shake things up a little bit, or see where I thought the opportunities were. And the closest thing they had to a BPO organisation was a tax return service for small businesses in Glasgow. A bit peaky, of course, but it was a faster moving. It wasn't big contracts with Tesco or whatever. This was a factory, a people factory of accountants doing tax return services, and they wanted to get into that higher volume.
Large scale version of what you first started in.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I'm not sure I was the best tax returner in life, I have to say. But I understand the dynamic. And the beauty of my experience was I'd been through a lot of finance. I'd seen a lot of business dynamics. I remember going back to that time as an accountant, and it was led by the FD. We decided to do a product P&L because we did interest-free, we did interest-bearing, we did all sorts of products in the market, and then bad debt was applied to it. I had to go away and find out how we applied the relevant numbers to the products so we could see what makes money and not. It sounds so bloody simple, but we had a net number, but we didn't know where the money was being made. And that sort of guidance to get to understand numbers a level down, just invaluable, just massively invaluable. So I felt equipped generally to understand my market, understand outsourcing dynamics, understand client management, understand propositions, to take that somewhere. But it was a massive gamble, because even on the day I arrived, nobody knew what the hell I was going to do. There wasn't a natural owner of me and my service. And it took a while. We went and looked at that business and tried to think about, is there other things we could do with a business like that, because it was so peaky. But I developed a really good relationship with the director, the head of pensions and tax for the UK. And I joined her board. And I persuaded her, because it wasn't done at the time, that we should have account plans. And you can imagine with the tax leadership, that were very senior partners. Who's this oik from the north? What opinions he got and things? But I never saw any proactive account planning. They all look fantastic. The most wonderful, when you're in sales and the client base of the names at an organisation like KPMG, they're already at the top table with things. I just thought I know this is a ridiculous thing to say for a company like that, I just thought they were remarkably unambitious with what ideas I took to the client. So I told her how I would approach it, and I made her, and that's not fair, I recommended to her that the senior partners of their verticals came and present account plans for the next year, for the year following, so we could work out the ambition, the propositions, whether they could go deeper, but just so she could hear them, because they just went off and they generate the revenues, tick the box, came back, business continued. I got to know the vertical partners pretty well because I was in the boardroom, and I used to report on pipeline, because they hadn't really seen that in the same way, and I used to report on performance and things. So I was in there in a feedback capacity. I was talking to one of the retail senior partners about one of the big retailers at the time, and that retailer was struggling deeply, as in profitability and things like that, and going through major cost reduction. But we were going in there with a very modest tax proposition, but I sort of realised it felt like it was enough to do the numbers that year that everybody did and got the partner tick, done my numbers, and I felt there was a big proposition and much bigger. Why did you go in and offer to take over all of the tax department, about 3 roles where they could manage you? Commit to taking, you'll have heard these propositions before, commit to taking 20-30% out, commit to improving things. Why do you go for why do you go to take over tax? Why? But those ideas were not, it was an annual machine that did enough, very successfully, because who the hell am I to suggest they're not?
Yeah.
But I found some of it quite strange, because I'd always developed my thinking and hope for the team around me to step up an idea, push harder, go bigger, test that, show ambition in your propositions. And maybe it was one bad example, but there wasn't that. They all did enough and knew what enough was, but they didn't go really big, which really surprised me. But I got on really well with this, but I had a fabulous educational year in that, and again, partner-led organisation. It's a different organisation structure. I was down in London 2 or 3 days a week. That's when I found out I was a celiac, that travelling and losing a lot of weight, and found out there was a problem. So I was away in London most of the time, but in a very strange environment where I wasn't the expert of anything in their eyes, but I was a provoker. But the tax leader enjoyed me provoking it, and so it was really, probably without her it would have been a problem.
So you must have learned a lot in KPMG
Yeah.
in terms of what your next decision was after that.
I realised I could cope in an alien environment. If I look back on anything, I arrived there when I knew my stuff for 15, 20, I just knew my stuff. I knew what I was doing, I knew what needed to be done. I was in a completely alien organisation without a real job, with a bit of a sponsor, but not really. So there was a way of just thinking, how do I make my place here? What is it I'm going to be? How do I create a need for my services? What do I bring to the table? So for a few months it was really scary, because you were sort of flitting around a bit, working out. So when I got to the group and found a sponsor, I suppose, then was allowed in to see how the mechanics and the machine worked, that I could take it back to my skill set, which was to develop and grow businesses, and start to ask the questions about why they're not testing that dynamic a little bit harder, or seeking presentation of plans for that. It was for such a brilliant clever, full of very bright sole trading businesses, because that's in essence part of you. You're doing your work, you're earning your revenues, and you're getting your bonuses, etc., etc.
But it didn't feel like home though.
No, I found I had a role to play in the boardroom that helped the leader at the time. I could see what value I brought, but I think I was playing at it. I was working that out. I was probably working out until the day, I had the choice of going, I guess.
And like you've said before, it's got to be fun, hasn't it? With everything else that goes on in
Very
life.
isolated year. So I was staying in London in a hotel. Nobody else really did. I didn't seem to hang around with anybody else. They're either London based, so they all went home.
Going back to that team thing, being
so
part of something, it's going to rub against your kind of DNA.
Yeah, I got given a couple of admin people to help when I created reporting. Where do you get that data from? Wouldn't that help the board? I did all that stuff I'd probably done a long time ago that I thought was lacking as an indicator to performance. But I never got that sense of belonging. And in truth, half of that senior partner group just didn't like me, because I was a threat of raising issues they never had before, which is present your plans, tell the leader what direction you've got, and which I just thought it was normal. As I was leaving, there was a big training exercise coming in, led by one of the big consultants. I can't remember which one it was, one of the sales consultancies, that was doing all of that, starting to bring all of that discipline to it that didn't really exist, quite bizarrely. So I sort of felt vindicated. There was something missing, and I was allowed to bring that to life in one part of the business. But it was never home. It was never home. I never had a group around me. I travelled to it, did the last day of the week in the Leeds office, of which I was not part of the Leeds office. It was just a desk.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of finding a role for yourself and making an impact, you had to create all of that. Lord. So there were some brave steps taken to take on some very senior, very wealthy, very successful people, and challenge the thinking a little bit. But I was allowed to do that, that's what was so refreshing about it. But well, somebody who likes to be liked by personality, I like to like my clients. I like to build relationships. I like to like my team. Those things, those sort of bonds are important to me. But down there, I had no real network. But in terms of developing me, probably a very accelerated year. It did me a lot of good.
So what was next?
Well, I'd been asked for probably all of that year by Cormac Toomey, who I know we both know very well. He used to work for me in Ventura. He'd made great progress in the US BPO world to develop European businesses for the big US players, and he was at Convergys. And he'd been asking, I even remember you were at my 50th birthday party, we're still in my ear about it. Then, and at the same time he accelerated that. The conversation came with KPMG about what the future, my unclear world was looking even less clear. So there was perfect time, very different organisation, but to go back into BPO, back into a series of acquisitions that Convergys had made in Europe, and try and grow that business. So I said yes eventually. Started off leading the UK business, which was in the old days of the LBM business, a sales organisation, and tried to start to go back to do what I always did, which was I had good, great young account managers, knew that business well. My background was customer service, not sales, so it was quite unique in terms of a depth of experience in it. But it was a great opportunity to say, what are we doing with these brilliant brands, single service lines, brilliant brands, try and get them growing and get their service lines opened up, build relationships with a bunch of young account managers. They were young, they've been there most of their careers, very bright, still in Concentrix now, most of them. To get that group, to try and inspire a group to push the numbers forward. It's a straight regional top line number to grow. So I was back in my comfort zones, had to get to know people. Again, I was away from home again, so the challenge continued, Spence. Where I was in Altrincham two or three nights a week, because that's where we based ourselves, and I felt we needed to be there, back in the call centre. And the journey started again in Convergys. So from UK, then he asked me to lead all of the European client base, to grow the European client base, and take my job onto new logo. So I took on new logo, client management, and a bit of marketing we did for Europe, for Convergys. And that was about 4 or 5 years of getting back on the bike, really. Different clients, growing much more from a distinct service line into more service lines, much more proposition led, got the front foot with the clients again. And we did really good growth in Convergys over the next 5 years until Concentrix came along. Concentrix was an important part of all of our lives, because there was a direct opposite number to me in the Concentrix world. This was a Concentrix buying Convergys. So you were never quite sure where the weight of leadership was going to come from the decision making. Concentrix had a much smaller European business than Convergys had, so we'd grown it up to about half a billion. They were a couple of 100 million, but it was a nice piece of business. It was about 700 or so $100 million business. And myself and Gary Slade, and Gary's doing a brilliant job at TP now, and done a brilliant job since we were both asked to redesign the structure together, ultimately with one leader. So we did a structure chart that designed the new world of Concentrix and Convergys Europe. And I guess whichever you look at it, because history will tell you whichever angle you want. Fortunately for me, I was selected. Gary was let go, but Gary went on to make a brilliant career in TP, and he's still there now doing a great job.
I mean, you could put a thin piece of paper between the two of you about who was right for that.
Yeah, I didn't anticipate it, because Concentrix people were making the decision in the main. So the global sales leadership was long-term IBM Concentrix person. They're all lovely people, really nice people. We got to meet them, not all, but I think my natural start point was, let's design the right structure. Gary and I talked about whether there should be these roles for more, 2 of us in there somewhere, but there wasn't really, it didn't make any sense. So you created a plan that could have been the end of that time or the start of that time. You just had to go with it. There wasn't, I don't think I remember a formal interview process, but I guess we were being assessed.
Yeah.
We're getting on with our jobs. We're different personalities in many ways, but both driven to grow businesses. I like Gary. But fortunately or not, and I say probably fortunate for Gary because he's really kicked his career, has gone on tremendously well. I was given the task of running that, what now would become a $750 million business. So I'd come from 50s to hundreds of 150s, 200, but this was enormous scale.
How did you change your style and approach? Because, you know, getting 10 people around the table in an office in Leeds when there was only 100 and probably 20 clients to deal with versus doing 700 million and hundreds of thousands of people.
250 clients, I think there was.
How did you change your way of working?
It's a really good question, because it became there wasn't a home, there wasn't a place to go where you all were anymore. The account management team and the sales team was scattered around Europe, and it became a Teams-based relationship, or probably Zoom then, I don't know which we were at the time. Try and lead a group of people in when you're probably getting together at best every quarter, or maybe even less often than that. Just had to try hard to get ambition and passion and energy across by teams into a much broader audience. I'm not sure if I had applied any great techniques to it, but I knew I had to lead and coach and develop, try and get ambition into people best I could, which is account planning. Have your account plans tell a story that what you're going to try and do this year, understand those steps in that journey that you need to do that, and try and get that thoroughness into a group of people that you don't sit and see. What became really important was my DRs, because in essence it was structured where I had vertical market leaders, and I had to have a close bond with them because the next group below, which I would have been closer historically, were too far removed. I couldn't get to 50 people apart from leadership calls. So I'd built my bonds with, put a very trusted group, and it took me a while to get that trusted group directly into me. And that 4 or 5 people, even if you're on Teams, is an easy group to manage. And so I had to concentrate on that type of relationship and accept that I couldn't get to 250 clients. I couldn't get to all the people in the normal sort of way. You couldn't get them together very often, just from a geography point of view. So I suppose the world changed. You just didn't go to a head office. You didn't go to where finance were and HR were, and didn't get in solution rooms together because you could all bring their heads in and work stuff out. The whole dynamic changed. It was just a massive company. And I was just, what is a 10 billion company now? It was a big number for me and a big number for the region. But the business was 10 times bigger than what we were running. So it had to run on a different rhythm. And I had to adjust to that.
So you've seen a lot of change in the industry then?
Yeah.
In terms of how it's evolved. I mean, when you stood there at the end of that warehouse with only 100 seats at the end thinking, am I going to fill this? You must have wondered, actually, is this industry ever going to be that big? So right now, what do you think the biggest challenges in the industry are? Not just the outsource industry, but also just call center, contact center as what it by itself.
I think it's facing a very interesting phase now. And with the world, our industry is going to be AI-tastic, all right? And there's nothing that any of us are doing that isn't in some way, shape or form discussing the merits of or the role of AI. I think it's over-rotated. I think absolutely my view is I think it's driven by share prices and whether you're a tech company or a people business. I think we've over-rotated to try and become technology companies, and there's a role for technology, but I think the industry is over-rotated. I like the idea. There's one of the very large BPOs. You're on page 5 before you realise that they actually do run call centres, because there's 5 pages of technology before you get there. And I know it's important. I'm not belittling the value of the businesses based on what the market values, but we've lost sight of the fact it's still very much a people business, and how those people interact with our clients, customers, is still critical to all of this.
And everything comes in cycles, so you must have seen a similar cycle to this before, you know, that kind of thing where everyone says it needs to be this led or that led, but actually it always comes back to people.
I think it does come back to people, and I think I have a massively strong belief in it. Is why I am where I am now, when I understood what they brought to the table. that you could use technology and AI to arm the people to do a better job. I don't think setting your stall out to just simply say AI can take out 40% of your calls because the machine can answer these types of queries. I think that's as easy a lever to pull once the tech's in place as going to India at the time when you took the labour arbitrage decision and hoped that the delivery would be what you wanted. I think when we're in a world now where some of the easy stuff's out, so the calls are a bit more complex, they're a bit more engaging, or there's more to be done. My view of how AI should be used, and certainly I represent that view of the ResQ as a business. They've designed AI to help coach and develop and guide the agents on the phone to do a better job, to get better outcomes for the clients. So it's written that way. It wasn't written to automate. It wasn't written to send so much of the contacts into an IVR that would then automate an answer. It was written to say, I'm going to help the staff be successful, earn more money if that's a driving force, whatever those motivations are. So I think we've over-rotated and forgotten what we are. Interestingly, there's some quite brave decisions going on with some of the clients about bringing work back, about engaging British people with British brands. And customer service now is going to be a little bit about engaging with them and the brand, introducing them to more of the brand's products and services, making sure they're more connected to that brand, because transactionally you can buy anything anywhere without speaking to a person. I know that now. But if you can get fantastic experiences with people and you arm those people to clearly understand how they can self-help and develop and do a better job, I think that's still, for this phase of the industry, is the best way of using AI.
So you think there's a re-ignition of UK workforce enforced by assisted technology that means it's a viable product now to be back onshore?
I think so. I think regulated markets, size of fines if you're going out of kilter in utilities or telco, etc. Then there's some being very careful about where you do your work, making sure technology is checking you're doing the work properly and validating you're doing the work properly. But I think there's just an expectation now that there's more to come out of these conversations. And you'll see much more dynamic around things like sales through service now, which would have been a billing, answering, customer service organisation. Starting to think about, if you've solved a problem, is it the right time to introduce another product from that company in the right way? And what AI is helping us do is teach the team how to introduce these opportunities and ideas to customers in the right way. And when they get it wrong, again, all transcripts are captured. It's easy to access. It's easy to understand where it's gone right or wrong. It's easy for a team lead to get in and help. But I love the fact it's been designed to help the operator, help the agent deal with the customer better and get a better outcome.
And that's what's resonating through your conversations now, being, the growth engine within ResQ, that those conversations are resonating with clients and buyers.
They are, because what I've had to look at my business today is it's got a very strong sales DNA, a bit like LBM in the Convergys world when they bought them. It was a sales organisation, originally outbound to generate new customers for brands, then inbound, retention, etc., but a sales organisation. When you've got that sales DNA, I think it's an easier step to take a service opportunity and introduce that sales DNA into that rapport with a customer than it is somebody who's been doing customer service for 10 or 15 years and ask that organisation to sell. Culturally, that's quite a hard step. So I feel there's an opportunity for those of us with that DNA to use technology to be better. And I think the whole concept of more complex work, longer calls, dealing with more complex issues, lots of regulation to make sure you're sticking to compliance, you're sticking to. There's starting to see a bit of increased comfort that some of that more work, some of that complex work should be here. And that's an opportunity for my business, I guess, to validate that and step into that space, but develop its capability so it can be more things to those important types of calls. So I think we're at a real crux. It could go one way, which technology eats into more and more and more of the contact. But is that what our clients really want? Do they want when is enough and not enough? When is it's gone too far? When you're not talking to customers and building relationship up with the brand, is that a 10% point? Is it a 30% point of that customer contact? I think we're heading down to a darker place at the moment, which is commercial commitment, lots of costs out, automation will take calls out. We'll leverage India or somewhere like that as well. It becomes how little can you run that service for well, rather than how do you really take the service forward. So, I mean, our proposition, I can't take on the big boys on the transformation plays with the technology, but we can use technology to enhance performance and back ourselves. And I think that's my bet. I think there'll be more coming back. I think brave customer service directors are seeing the UK being validated that it does some stuff really well, and good people will come back into the industry and stay in the industry because it's been decimated before, but I'm starting to see opportunities again. Two of my sites, one there's 600 people applying for every job, and the other one there's 200 people applying for every job on the market. So we've got to do something, and I think there's a need and a capability out there to re-energise the contact centre market.
So you don't seem to be slowing down.
I was intending to.
So what's getting you out of bed every morning then? Because you're still as passionate as you ever been.
Yeah.
But it must be a different reason to get out and do what you do now compared to 10, 20 years ago.
Some of the energy resonates back to what I enjoyed the most. So what I did at the end of the Concentrix Convergys time, and I know you interviewed Craig, we had a good talk, me and Craig at the time. I was ready for change and I didn't want the big machine. My job had become too much reporting and not enough client time, not enough designing properties, things I loved, not enough difference making. It became a numbers game, a spreadsheet game, and managing the news. And I increasingly just didn't enjoy that, but felt the pressure of it, but didn't enjoy it. I sat and thought about when I loved it the most, because I thought I've got 2 or 3 years sort of max in any key leadership role. So I thought, well, what did I like best? What phase did I like best? What made me excited the most? And it went back to Ventura, when we could create loads of jobs in communities that needed it. It went back to that sort of standard feeling of the job, the difference I could make. If I'm successful, we make difference to lives. We can create jobs, we can create promotion opportunities, we can fill buildings up, we can give people careers. And when you got so big and you were selling all over the world, you never sort of saw the difference you were making. And I don't think I'd realised how much I missed that. So this starts off at a 50, 60 million business, but you create an opportunity for 100 jobs, it makes a massive difference to a community. And I spend more time back in the contact centres again, getting to know the people who are using the tools, growing the business, recruiting people. Just got that buzz quicker than I realised, in fairness. I thought I was just going to guide from a strategy point of view. But it's back to, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make a difference. I'm not just going to help them think about the business strategy. I'm going to help them grow. Just get back to that fundamental feeling of help with the thoughts, propositions, help them with the conversation with the clients, help them think differently, full objective to help them grow. And that started pretty well. So it's that buzz again, community difference. Back to my dad. We had 2 arguments. One, he was very proud of me because I could create jobs in communities that needed it. We had a big fallout when I was moving those jobs to India because the market moved on to arbitrage. But I always said, Dad, I have to sell to India because I won't get the UK part either, so they go hand in hand. But he had a big problem with me because he thought all the good I'd done, I was shoving away to other parts of the world. But back to that job creation that I could see and sense and feel, and I know the leadership of my business today at ResQ. I'm very passionate about the community. So is our South Africa partner as well, just ideologically loves the difference he can make to his communities. And that's more than sales numbers, more than size of business. Those things don't matter to me anymore. I think if we can create jobs and make a difference to the business, and in doing so, if I'm successful, the business grows anyway and people flourish. The byproducts are great, but it's back to that buzz of making a difference. I think that's what I had to spend a bit of time thinking about what I wanted. And it was a Ventura phase of that brilliant time with brilliant people, developing them and doing what was a good job in the end.
So you haven't made that many mistakes in your career because you've obviously been so successful, but if there was something you'd change, what would you changed?
I haven't regretted any of the steps I've made. Some have been necessity, some have been time. I have periods of time I regret not doing university because I went straight at 16 and I've worked ever since. I never had that. There's parts of that experience and fancy doing it in dairy. So there's a little bit of regret about what I've watched my daughters do and what I hope to watch my grandkids do with that experience of life. Very often get shouted down about that because what regrets of look how well you've done, look how successful as a family we are and how much we enjoy the benefits of it. I've also, there's been one occasion in my life where I decided heart, not head, and that was probably the move from Ventura first time round, which was an inappropriate reaction to emotion. And you've known me for a long time. I'm quite calm, so I don't panic into decisions. Probably one I should have breathed a little bit there, because I had to go away. The business was not, I'm not saying it's all down to me, but the business didn't help anybody or anything. I'm not sure it helped me, and I ended up back there again. So that was an emotional decision. But that said, I went into a new environment and grew, probably personally. Didn't grow the business. It actually was the worst performing time of my career. But I learned a lot about myself and people and different dynamics out of the corporate world, and I think that's probably stood me in good stead.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for sharing everything today. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Learned more about you than I thought I would today, but thanks very much.
Well, sadly, it goes back a long way, doesn't it, when you start at 60 and go backwards. There's a lot of ground to cover, isn't there? But I've really appreciated the time, Spencer. Thank you.